All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of the Training Without Conflict podcast. Today, my guest is Ian Dunbar. It's a legend in the dog training world. He graduated in veterinary medicine in UK, in London. Then doctorate degree in behavior at UC Berkeley. The famous SIRIUS Puppy program, which, I mean, just opened up a whole new page as what we need to do with dogs, and especially what we need to do with puppies. Currently, I know you have a lot of stuff going on online. There is the Dunbar Academy. There is numerous of very, very important books. Also, founder of the apdt, presenter, seminars, lectures all over the world. I'm not sure if you still actively do it. I mean, that's a lot of time, especially now with all the restrictions. Most likely everything is Zoom and online.
You know, all I do now in dog, well, I answer questions online at the academy, but I volunteer for an organization that trains assistance dogs for veterans. I'm a volunteer now. I love it. The dogs live with us. We have a massive training room and our own private dog park. And so I get up, I work a little with the dogs. I have coffee, I do some writing, and then I'll go and play with the dogs. And in the evenings, because we have to train them to be house dogs companions too. So in the evening, we do the household training, you know, the couch time, the settle down time, and hugging and what have you. That's all I do now, and I really enjoy it.
The way it should be. Are you still in California? Are you still in the Bay Area?
Yeah, my house is in the Bay Area, but I've not been there since March. I'm sequestered down in Escondido.
Okay. So that's where that program is.
Next Step Service Dogs is the organization, and it's 10 degrees warmer here.
We crossed paths so many times, but I don't think we ever personally met. I know you, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you did work at the San Francisco SPCA as well at one point, or no?
Yeah, way back in, early 80s, 83, because I had my puppy, my Malamute then. I designed the behavior program they had. You know, Richard Avazino was very far-sighted, as you know, and he said, right, we want a behavior program. And I was there a couple of years, and everything I suggested, he made happen. It was a cool place in the 80s, the San Francisco SPCA. Yes. And I saw you many times from a distance. It was really funny. I didn't remember until today. You know, I was thinking, who is this famous person? You know, and I went to your website and looked and thought, wow, you know, you've done a lot. And then I thought, I know him. That's Ivan from the SPCA. And I suddenly put it all together today. So that was really, really funny.
Yes, it's so. Yeah, I started working there. I worked for the guide dogs for the blind in San Rafael, and then it was just the commuting and everything. It was too much. So then I changed and I started working at the SPCA. Richard Avanzino was still the director at the time that I started, but at the end I don't know if he retired or what happened, but there were some changes. That's when the kind of quite a bit of changes happened at the SPCA.
He retired, yeah. Then the director came from St. Hubert's in New Jersey, and he took over, I think. But, you know, Rich Avanzino was there for years and made it a very unique and, for me, fun place to work back then. I mean, the Hearing Dog program, and you know, that was the first of its kind of like raising money for a program. And they did a lot of that, you know, rather than saying, oh, please give us money for unwanted dogs, they would pick a program like food for dogs living with people, you know, with disabilities or with AIDS. And they did a lot of really cool stuff.
Yeah, one of the really interesting things, now it's a common, now it's It's almost very trendy, and every shelters that know how to make money, they have the same model. But at the time when he started, probably nobody even believed that people will spend so much money and like to see dogs in that kind of environment. And like, he had a vision that was completely new at the time, and he made it happen.
There were only back then about half a dozen humane societies around the country that were really progressive, like in Boston, in Wisconsin, and a couple in obviously, Peninsula Humane, San Francisco, and then Marin Humane. And they were really doing good stuff from a behavior viewpoint, but they didn't call it behavior, they called it education. And then it was actually Marin Humane Society, this is a little known fact, that the very first off-leash puppy class in the world was taught at Marin Humane Society. Yeah, they asked me to come up with a really unique and different way to train dogs, and I did. And then it was Pat Campy, and what was the other lady's name?
It was Trish something, right?
I can't remember.
You're talking. It's the one in Novato.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, I think it's Trish, but I cannot remember her last name at the moment either.
But they got 20 puppies, and they said, Ian, this won't work. We're going to let them off leash. I said, yeah. And they said, oh, wait, we can't. Can you train it? So I said, yes. I commuted, across the bridge and taught that puppy class. And then I thought, that was fun. And I founded SIRIUS. I thought, that's what I want to do in my life. It was just so much fun.
Yes.
Because, training was always dealing with problems. People wouldn't go to class till they had a problem. But now we got them at 3 months, and I could tell you, well, this is what's going to happen. And I'll tell you when I see it happening here, like first week in class, I would say, I can now name 3 dogs who are going to bite their family members when they're 8 months old. It's so obvious, the dog won't approach, it backs up, it ducks its head. And you would locate the problem and just resolve it so fast. And it was safe and it was fun. It was probably one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life, apart from the canine games. But the puppy classes they're brilliant.
It was a revolution for sure. It was like, people wouldn't even think to do anything with puppies. So let them grow up or let them do this. And as you say, eventually we can have some serious problems and you can.
Yeah, and then people would say, oh, it's in the breed, or he'll grow out of it. No, he won't. This will get worse and worse. Your puppy's nibbling on your carpet, your 8-month-old dog will destroy your house. And anyway, it was fun.
So with the puppies, since we're talking about this, what is your take on environment versus genetics, that old but always very interesting debate?
Well, I have 3 answers to that question. Like if I were talking to a breeder, they said, should I breed this dog? I would ask them questions like, how long did his great-great-grandparents live for? Let's breed a dog that has longevity and its forebears. Have you ever had a behavior problem with it? Has it ever been sick? And usually with most breeders, I say, no, I wouldn't breed that dog. So when it comes to picking the dog to breed prior to conception, I am an absolute ruthless geneticist.
Okay.
As soon as that sperm goes into that egg, I say, well, forget genes. The gene team's had its chance. Everything now comes down to behavior and training and socialization. And so that's why people think I'm like a rabid, socializing environmentalist. I'm not, I'm realistic. Genes before we breed, after we breed, socialization. My answer to, say, students when I lectured at Cal would probably take 10 weeks in a course. They're both important. and they intertwine. And so you can't take genes on their own. Let's say we had two litters. Let's pick bull terriers and golden retrievers. And we say, well, bull terriers act like bull terriers because they were bred from bull terriers, and golden retrievers the same. And I say, yeah, but bull terriers had a bull terrier mum and bull terrier litter mates. So the first thing you got to test is a cross-fostering experiment. We put one golden in the bull terrier litter, where quickly he has to learn, put up or shut up. Mm-hmm. It's a different type of play here. Then we put a bull terrier in the golden litter, and in a while he's like on his back and smoking dope and wagging his tail, and he's calm and waggy, So we have to check what is the effect of the social environment. Well, of course, the biggest aspect of any social environment is the owner. Why? Because they are the trainer and educator. They are specifically changing the environment to change the dog. And I think a lot of why SIRIUS became famous was, in my research, I realized that you could change temperament overnight. We saw this a couple of times watching our puppies grow up. And so I thought, wow, breeders or new puppy owners be really interested to know this stuff. So when I started SIRIUS, I said, yeah, it's about manners training, but also behavior training and temperament training. We don't test temperament. We test it and train it and try and mold it and change it. So if a pup is too uppity, we'll calm him down. If he's too nervous, we build his confidence. Mm-hmm. And I found with puppies, temperament is comparatively easy to mold. But because back then in the dog fancy, they wouldn't even think of training a dog till it was 6 months or a year old.
Correct.
Especially if it were a working dog or going to be a competitive dog. And so to me, they missed the whole time when the brain is incredibly malleable. And that was, the second reason I came to Berkeley. I came to work with Frank Beach to study sexual differentiation in dogs, how sex differences and sex develops differently in males and females, but also to join the Diamond Rosenzweig study on how environment changes brain anatomy. And this research fascinated me. I discovered it in the mid-67.
Tell us a little bit about this. That would be interesting to go a little bit.
It really is. And just changing the environment and changing, of course, the social environment. You put a rat not just in a cage on his own, but with another rat, and the number of cells in the brain produce dendrites, connections, synapses. But without that environmental stimulation, neonatally, and say before 3 months, millions and millions of brain cells die off. Mm-hmm. So that's what's happening here in real time when you pet a dog, when he sees a child, when he plays with another dog, you're forming synapses in the brain. And a lot of people think a synapse is, this cell plugs into this one. No, the dendritic spines move, like an elephant's trunk. And the more stimulation you get, they waggle, then boom, they plug into another cell, and you've got a connection. And that happens in real time, in the same seconds with a short lag time of when you're handling or petting a puppy. And so, yeah, for me, everything was about temperament molding or temperament training and speeding them up, slowing them down. Having said that, a border collie will always be a border collie and a basset a basset. In the same way, a dog will always be a dog. So if you want to say, well, what are the effects of genes on behavior? I say, well, it's a dog. It's going to bark, chew, dig, bite, wag his tail, But you can mold that behavior, the extent to which he's going to do these doggy things. And so like the breed you have, you pick the ultimate Ferrari of dogs for a Ferrari sport. Having said that, a Ferrari is probably not a good car. Now, a Mini, you pick a Mini. Not only is this fast and can accelerate, but it can move back and forth. Okay, the Ferrari of dogs would be the German Shepherd. Beautiful dog when it works, but they're going to spend a lot of time in the shop. because they're so sensitive and tuned to work as a pet dog. They can be oversensitive and become fearful, usually of strangers. And so, yeah, you pick the right dog, for the sport. That's not to say you can't make him better. I mean, I love when I look at trainers, the trainers I love, they pick a dog, any dog, best dog for the sport or worst dog for the sport. Let's say they're doing agility and they pick a French bulldog or a basset, instead of a border collie. I enjoy both the trainers that take these dogs and make them better.
Yes.
They don't just rely on the dog's natural skills, they refine them, and they can turn them on and turn them off like that. So that dog can change jobs like we put on a hat, right? I'm a policeman now. Now I'm at home drinking a beer. And when people can do that with a dog, that garners a lot of respect from me. And so I get a lot of joy out of watching the lesser known breeds compete.
For sure. For sure.
Apart from it being hilarious, I mean, can you think of anything funnier than the basset doing agility? But that's a lot of the point of it. You want people to react when they see your dog competing, either going, wow, or like, oh, that's so cool. It's so funny. It's making me smile.
Right now, there is not right now, but let's say in the last 5-10 years, quite a big of a movement in science. I'm sure you are aware of Richard Dawkins, which is from, he had this wonderful book, The Selfish Gene. And then the other one that I really, really recommend to everybody is the Robert Plomin, The Blueprint. That's where the reason of asking environment, nature versus nurture, that, again, as you said, medieval age question. But recent years, right now, there is a lot of data that comes out that really proves the genetics, the genetic predisposition in dogs or humans or anything. It's far more important. And I think Robert Plomin was the one that has that one saying that parents matter. No, parents are important, but they don't matter that much. Meaning that it is very important how somebody is raised in the environment, but ultimately what you are programmed with, what you come with, that's your home base, and that's where you're gonna end up going if you're allowed to, right? And so there was some interesting twin studies. I mean, that this becomes now so popular to where it was actually, I believe it was in England during the World War, and a mother leaves kids, just infants, newborns, at few different places, orphanages. And what happened was they all got picked up by completely different people. Like some were like very intelligent, very accomplished people, and some were just middle class families. And to make that story short, what ended up, they kind of meet by pure accidents in the university eventually. And they end up liking the same things, and they just pretty much being identical twins, raised in different environment. Not much really changed them from being the identical twins, which was almost like really a beginning of that paying way more attention to the genetic side of what we come with, and understand that we can guide and we can control, and it's much easier to understand and guide and control what comes naturally, genetically, than trying to fight against it and try to make something that it's not programmed to be, right?
Yeah, which is what so many people do with dogs.
Yes.
especially for companion dogs. All the things it's been bred for, they say, "What? You're never going to run and lunge and chase in this town again." But that's what it was bred for. It's what my great-great-great-great-grandparents did. Yeah. It's, but it is where ultimately I would say, as I said, a border collie is a border collie, a Malinois is a Malinois, but socialization, training, and environment has to be all important because it's all we can do. And so I think if your followers, say, read my stuff on breeding, which we have free courses on Dunbar Academy. There's one for breeders. You'll think, this guy is tough. Yeah, I wouldn't breed 90% of the dogs out there, if only for longevity. I'm sorry, I've had 3 purebred dogs die at 7. That's not right. And so I would like them to live till they're 14. So the first thing I would select for is longevity, which, if you think about it, is the best overall indicator of not just physical health, but also behavioral health.
Yes, it's a healthy mind, body-mind, of course.
Yeah, you don't live long if you bite your owner. Yeah. And so I'm pretty tough when it comes to genes, but that is just a quick choice to make. Shall we breed these 2 dogs? And once that's done, everything for me is socialization and training. And the effects can be enormous. And say, let's put it this way. The best way I can describe it is, say we take a golden retriever and a Malamute, and we either socialize and train them or we don't. There will always be that same difference on any behavioral variable between Goldens and Malamutes, but this difference. But the difference between are you not socialized and trained or you are is the difference between the pavement and the top of the Empire State Building. That's the way I look on it. You'll always have that genetic difference. It'll never be overridden. But the difference that comes from socialization and training, and quite simple things. So you could take a highly trained obedience dog, but you didn't quite socialize him properly. So as he's performing, a lot of people start clapping and he freaks. And years of training just go down the toilet. And so to me, always the dog's temperament comes first as the solid foundation, the terra firma that we build the foundation on, which for me would be sit down and stand, stays. On top of that, we'd put centripetal attraction. Does the dog want to be close to you? And on that, where we build all the fancy stuff that we're going to do, whether it's snazzy healing or hunting. And I find a lot of people in working professions, they have a dog that doesn't have basics. And so, like hunting dogs, how many of them do you know don't have a recall?
Right.
It's ridiculous. You never put a recall on your puppy because they don't. I remember a lady was interviewed in England on TV. She'd won many international hunting competitions with her golden. And the producer of my TV program then interviewed her and said, "What do you think of this new English chap who's teaching these off-leash puppy classes? What do you think?" She says, "Oh, well, number one, training is not a game. You can't possibly train a dog till it's 6 months to a year old." Okay, so it is serious. Now, as she's saying this to the camera, she's sitting on the floor at her home with a pheasant wing in her hand, teaching a puppy to retrieve the pheasant wing. As she's saying, you can't play train puppies, she's play training a puppy. And that's probably why she won all the trials and all her competition couldn't compete it, because she kept saying, "Oh, I would never train a puppy." But she did, and she was, So, it's...
Oh, it no question. It really, especially today, it would be a shame not to just to wait for a puppy to grow up and not to do anything. That would be just wrong. Like, really, that would be... I always give those examples of, I'm coming Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, back in the communism time, like in Romania, the orphanages, there were just so many kids. Like, I sometimes even in my classes show those videos on YouTube of those kids that had zero interaction with no parents, no conversation, no play, which play is essential for, like if you don't think about training, forget training, but not to play with a dog or not to play with a kid at that age, you completely will put a limitation of the brain development.
I'm really amazed when, children or puppies grow up in a really impoverished environment, but so many of them somehow cope. They get through. And I think because of that, then people don't think early socialization is so important. But what I tell them is, yeah, that dog is coping. He will never be what he could have been. Mm-hmm. You stole that from him when he was a neonate or a very young puppy or baby. So he will never be what he could have been. But yes, the coping mechanisms of the mammalian brain is unbelievable, and it can withstand an awful lot of early damage. But it often leaves a lot of scars when people don't do the work. When that dog is fearful of people, you see, that is a self-reinforcing process. In the same way that socialization is self-reinforcing, like say with crazy labs, they'll approach anyone and say, hello, I'm a lab, pleased to meet you, I love you, which means they'll be more likely to do that tomorrow. So socialization is continually reinforced, but for standoffish puppies, they're not socializing today because they're standoffish. Well, I'll tell you what, they'll be even more standoffish tomorrow and less likely to socialize. So that the fact that dogs can cope and we can manage problems, or we put them away when visitors come to a house, or we coddle them on leash when they walk. But the sad thing is they miss the real joy of life of being a dog, that you can be walked off leash and you can sniff and you can have lots of freedoms because the owner has socialized you and basically only have one command that works: sit. You can go a long way with an off-leash dog if he just has an emergency sit, and no matter what he's doing, you can get him back under control. Sit. And then you've got options. You could call him because now he's looking at you and he's proven you're in control because he just sat, he's being compliant. You could do a recall, or you could do stay, or you could walk up to him, or you could run up to him and do the recall yourself because the environment's going downhill so rapidly. A bunch of children are running up to him. Sit, I do the recall, put him on leash, my dog's fine. And, so we can go a long way by just at one emergency command with a socialized dog. But when you don't have that, so like now I worry so much in COVID, there's going to be so many 8-month, 10-month-old puppies that are scared of their own shadow. Mm-hmm. And their quality of life is going down the toilet. So, I've posted a lot of free webinars on neat ways to socialize your puppy during the shutdown with social distancing. It's simple things like have all your extended family and friends who you want the dog to like as an adult send you a used T-shirt. And then we're going to have a Zoom. And whenever you talk, you're going to let your dog sniff the right T-shirt so he can hear the person, he can smell, and then we praise and give 5 treats. And for the children, we give 10 treats. And does that work? I don't know, but I would definitely try it out.
Interesting.
And then we can socialize, socially. I tell people, it's wonderful to teach dogs now, instead of being social loons that you walk them, and whenever they see another dog, they want to run up and greet it and they want to jump on people. We now teach dogs the default greeting is no greeting, but we set it up. We get all our family and friends to come to our house and walk the block clockwise, spaced out. We're going the other way with our puppy. Well, he's going to meet 20 strangers, but we know these strangers and they know what to do. So as we approach, they stop and we sit our dog. Then they walk by. The default greeting is no greeting. Occasionally, after 5 laps and 100 greetings we've practiced, we say to the dog, sit, stay. Okay, say hello. And the ersatz stranger knows to call the dog and have it sit before petting it and keep it. We now could actually socialize better trained dogs because of the social distancing. An arm's length, 6-foot leash, that's a 9-foot distance instead of 6 feet. So we can do it if we put our minds to it. There are ways to socialize, but it's just not being done. And we have two hidden problems, which I call them adolescent onset surprises: separation anxiety and fear of people. And why? Because the dog looks normal in COVID times when you're at home with him. No, what happens when you go to work and the kids go to school and he's left at home alone? He will freak, but they don't see it now. And then the fear of strangers. We don't see it because the dog's at home. Vet doesn't see it till the pup's probably about 6 to 8 months old. So it's why I've always, for me, socialization and training is just everything, because it's all we can do now. And yes, I prefer prevention. Someone called me out on this today. I was reading one of the comments on a question I answered last week, and it says, all I ever hear is prevent the problem. It's easily preventable, easily solved when the animal's young. And so I said, the training protocols are the same, even if it's an adult. And that's what I do. Yes, it will take longer, but it's all we can do. And so I love that quote by, I think it's attributed to Confucius, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Yeah. Let's start training now. And because we can pull them round. I've just worked recently with 2 dogs scared of their own shadow, raised in way up north in Montana. They both come round, and quickly, because we are troubleshooting them every day. And is it stressful for them? You bet. Poor dogs. But day by day it gets easier on them. We can now introduce them to a stranger in about 30 seconds. When they first met me, it took about 3 hours. But they've now both met, one of them about 40 strangers and the other one several hundred. And it's getting quicker and quicker and easier each time. Not as quick as the puppy and puppy class. We could have solved this problem week 1. So we can only do what we can do, and the time to do it is now. But I find so many people will offer excuses for training without realizing it's an excuse. Will he grow out of it? Well, he was abused when young. My view is, no, he won't grow out of it unless you train him. If he's abused by young, well, that was terrible. But let's now get him over that abuse now. I find so many people don't train. They say things like, oh, well, he's an Afghan. Or a pet owner says, oh, he's a Malinois. And they don't even try to train. And it's such a shame, I think. But I don't get on people's case for that. I'm not the sort of trainer who says, then you shouldn't have got a dog in the first place. I find a lot of sort of holier-than-thou trainers out there speaking down to owners and not helping them. If someone comes to me with a dog, my job is to advise them how best to train that dog, a stupid choice, right now, not in puppyhood, because they've got that silly choice right now.
So when you have, I hope we agree, and in some places where we have like you would have a genetically weak dog, and there is ways to recognize that. And there is no question that training and socialization and just interaction is critical, no matter what. But there is certain limitations, right? Because they cannot overcome, like let's for example take the sudden loud noises, which is a very common part of a test, right? I've been breeding dogs since late 80s, and we breed a lot of dogs. I also was at the guide dogs very closely, very interested in their program, which was, it was by the time I think his name was Clarence Pfaffenberg. he made the little puppy testing, and in his book.
Well, he actually, Paffenberger popularized the work that was done by Scott and Fuller at Bar Harbor, Maine. So he just wrote it in a way that the average person could understand. And of course, at San Rafael, they took that on board totally. So in the 50s, they were actually pretty advanced in terms of raising the puppies. But I find from going back, it's not changed that much since the 50s. And I think with like the new revolutionary stuff that I've learned about socialization, especially neonatal stuff, is astronomical on what it can do to a dog, whether he has brilliant genes or not. Mm-hmm. And by the way, what would I do if a dog I would consider was genetically defective? Well, I would spay or castrate it immediately. And I would include in that if a dog required, say, an elective cesarean to be born. Yeah, I would do the cesarean. Then I would say maybe we should think of castrating and spaying the entire litter plus the mum.
Yeah.
Because veterinary science is for the survival of the individual, not for the progressive destruction of the breed. So that's how maniacal I am about genes. But as a pet, I would say, well, he's castrated, so he won't pass these genes on, but let's give him the best shot at being a pet. And if I knew his lineage in terms of breeds, I would say, just so you know, starting at 5 months and maximizing at 8 months, this dog will spook out to sudden noises. So when he is a neonate and the ears are barely open at 2.5 weeks, let's subject him to every noise he's likely to hear, including loud noises, because they can't hear them too well. Right. They feel the vibrations, hand claps, balloons popping. You can buy apps for every noise there is. Let's turn it up to 100 decibels. Let's handle these neonates and just over and over and over. Let's hit them with it. And people who are doing this now, my favorite trainer in the world is Russian. She lives in Indianapolis. And the way she selects her dogs, they're specially bred, or they come from humane societies, because the dog she competes with was a little white pit bull that they found in a shelter, and that did very well competing against the military and the police. I think she was the only non-military police individual. And she came second, and everyone said, no, you really came first, but you hadn't got a uniform, so we couldn't give it to you. But the selection is extreme, but the way she raises these animals, the videos of it, and you can, your listeners can Google her name, Julie Case, she has a Facebook page, and you'll see her socialization videos, and you will not believe it, what she does with these neonates. 3 weeks old, she's got a whole bunch of kindergarten children handling the puppy, passing it as they clap and sing songs. And then they have the room, the floor is covered in balls and crinkly paper and collapsed garbage cans and seesaws. And this is where the puppies are being socialized. The number of brain cells which are making dendritic connections and living there compared to living in an apartment, it never goes out. The brain cells that are dying. So when we now look at the means available I think the military, cotton on to this, but the way they did it was too silly. I mean, what's it called, the military system where?
The super,
6 exercises, each one is 15 seconds long, and done in true military fashion. We will repeat this 5 times for 5 seconds, or what have you. It was the right idea, but not 0.01% of what you should be doing. Then neonatal stimulation has an enormous effect on the dog. And I call it, what I say is, my analogy is, it gives your dog padding to withstand all the ills that the world is heir to, all the weird stuff that's going to happen, children running up, tripping over and headbutting a dog when he's chewing a bone. The dog will say, oh, been there, done that. Yeah, when I was 4 weeks old. And when they talk about socialization, people, I don't think, really understand what we're talking about because of what they say. Well, you shouldn't do it for more than 20 minutes. No, I do it till the puppy passes out. And then he falls asleep for 45 minutes while his brain is making a permanent trace. Then he wakes up, he's ready to go again. And if you want to understand, I think, what is right for dogs and puppies in terms of experience and exercise, watch them play to the exhaustion, which is what they'll do. It's what every litter of puppies does. They wake up, they yawn, they pee, they scratch, they pee, they poop, then they find another puppy to bite on, and they do it till they're exhausted. They go to mum and suckle till they fall asleep. They play until exhaustion. That's what we're not doing to puppies. We're not socializing to exhaustion or giving them experience to exhaustion. You can't do too much with a puppy because you'll just fall asleep.
It tells you when. Correct.
Having said that, I don't mean to say you frighten the living daylights out of an unsocialized puppy, but if you've been doing it since neonatehood, or since he was a neonate, through puppyhood, no, you can scream at the puppy, shout, run down, fall over, and do all this high-level socialization. You know, I got caught out by this right here about 3 months ago. I went in the training room and I tripped. Every single dog in training spooked. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my word, yeah, you know, we used to do that in puppy class. We don't even do it in SIRIUS now. An exercise in SIRIUS Puppy Training was I do it with the kids. I say, look, here, we can play a joke on your parents. When I go, you know, from that children's song, a tissue, we all fall down. Or I think in America, they say ashes, all fall down. When I sneeze, I want you all to fall down, some of you to go still, and others to pretend you're having a fit. And it's a joke on your parents. And I watch what the puppies do. What do the puppies do? Well, the first dog to hit these children are pit bulls followed by labs. Like as if they say, it's not my fault, lick, I'm sorry, lick. What happens to the German Shepherd? He doesn't move. He sits next to his owner and goes, what do I do? That is a weird response. And that's telling you this shepherd is so weirded out by a child falling, yet the owner doesn't notice it because the dog remains in a sit stay. And, you know, we just don't know what socialization is anymore. Puppies in schools is the way to do it. You know, litter of neonates should be in every kindergarten class there is. And then we'd have fewer dog bites, especially dogs biting children.
I know, like for me, like I look at it again, I used to believe I wanted to, even in that military program and some of those, you know, neonatal programs, and I did quite a few interesting. I mean, with me, it was very easy because I have, like, again, I have like all the dogs and the females that I breed, they're like, at least by now, who knows, maybe 12, 13 generations of dogs that I know, that I've bred. So I did, there was a time where I was really trying to see if this, because it's so hard to know if something, how do you know if that puppy was sound to begin with and we didn't need to do anything, or it was not sound, but it actually what we did in that early age truly helped and changed. And there were times, early 90s, I split litters in two. And I did with some and I didn't with some. The ones that, like, I did not find much, if any, difference in development. The most change in development I found with the dogs that had just a more of a normal interaction, and when play was involved, any form of play. That really made them very confident and very curious and ready to explore and ready to interact. And the ones that did not have a chance to play, they were very observant, but you can see them always judging, always thinking a little bit. Eventually, I decided to, even in my training program, to stop using the cotton balls and tickle them and put them in the cold. And I stopped it just because I never really saw a change. And there was a time where I really, and eventually I decided that that's such a bad idea, but there was a moment that I wanted to breed 2 very unsound dogs, like noise sensitivity, just completely always aware of the environment. And we know that it kind of comes in. There is some genetic predisposition to that. And I was so close to breed that and see what I can do if I go just crazy with that early on programs of development, and I never had the guts to do it because it's especially I breed Malinois, and when you have Malinois that are not sound, the problems that you have are different than Labrador that's not sound.
That's an understatement. I think there the example you give is when you talk about, say, sound sensitivity. If a dog is sound sensitive, and that certainly has a genetic component to it, because we bred them to be sensitive to sound and to respond to it. Sometimes going back to the flock, other times going out away from the flock to protect it, but then we bred them to be sensitive to sound. What I have found from puppy classes is we can prevent the dog from becoming oversensitive to sound as an adult in a way that will severely change its temperament and behavior. Because if you think about it, reactivity to sound, you have a totally different dog there, say a Malinois versus a Bloodhound or a Newfie, you know, slight sound and your Malinois like, woo! And the Newfie's it hasn't even moved, you know. And so a tiny genetical, physical difference can have a massive effect on temperament. So the way I sort of step back and look at husbandry, if you like, which is raising and training, first is what is natural? What do dogs do at that age in the wild? Well, neonates, not much. They wiggle, they pee, they poop, usually require stimulation to do it. They don't have many senses, but they can smell and feel. So that's when I would introduce dogs to strangers. One sniff, they know you're a stranger, and they can feel you. So, and the feel, I would get rid of the 7 of the 13 most common bite triggers, you know, the collar region, the 2 ears, the muzzle, the forepaws, the ghoulies, hugging and looking in their eyes. I would start looking in a Rottweiler's eyes before his eyes have opened. Why wait till they're 4 weeks old when you can do it at 3.5 weeks? He's like, is that a human face? And I'm looking in his eyes and puffing in him, you know, smell my breath and all that stuff. So there's one way to look at it. What is natural in the wild? If the dog were left to its own devices, how much would it play? How long would it play? What would it do? Well, it would do everything to develop social savvy, one of the most complex skills there is. When you're walking your dog and he sees another dog he doesn't know, how does he know instantaneously whether he should look at that dog or not, whether he can approach that dog or not? That a well-socialized dog can tell that in a flash, and they know whether to go still and just look away. So the other way I look at it is, how can we prove it? Well, if we did a genetical breeding study, it would take 20 years. It would take now a lot of gene sequencing stuff and probably cost, a few $100 million. Well, that ain't going to happen. However, how quickly can we do a study on training? Very quickly, as opposed to studies, say, on cognition. They take forever, and your effects require very sophisticated statistics. If I did a study on training, and my favorite studies are what I call test, train, test, you're going to have this dog for 25 minutes. So I test his comprehension on, say, verbal commands. Sit, down, sit, stand, down, stand. 5 times over, verbal commands only. If the dog doesn't sit, I repeat the command. I repeat it to a maximum of 5 times. If he doesn't sit, I then lure him to sit and carry on with the next one, which is down. Okay, so that's my test. Sit down, sit, stand down, stand, verbal commands only, multi-commands commands if necessary. Then I calculate what I call the response reliability percentage. So if I repeat it 5 times for each sit from the stand, I've got 5 repetitions, 5 responses divided by how many commands did I give? Well, I'm only scoring up to 6, 5 verbals and a lure. And I come out with a percentage. Well, a lady who's starting one of these studies in England just said, I got a dog, he won't do anything. What do we do? I said, okay, here's the protocol. You say, sit 5 times, no response. You try to lure him, no response. He has a score of 6, but 0 responses. Now you physically move him into the sit for the next position. So we go on. But you're getting a score of 0 response reliability. Brilliant, because this is the pre-test. Imagine now what just 20 minutes lure reward training is going to do to this dog. I can improve that from 0 to about 70% in 20 minutes. And so when we're doing research on training, the effects are enormous. A dog that won't let go of a retrieval toy. We can change that in 1 session, but this is the research that's not being done. Instead, people will talk about, oh, well, is it this gene? Is it bred into the dog? Was it his grandfather? Or we should do a study on this, or studies on cognition in learning. My view is it'll take forever, it'll cost a fortune, and your p-values won't exist because you need sophisticated statistics. I'm going to produce data in 20 minutes by just training 6 dogs that my p-values will be 0.01. So if I graph out the histogram scores of the pre-test and the post-test, the same test before and after training, you will see daylight between the 2 bell curves. We don't need to do statistics on this to know that the p-value is going to be 0.01. It's going to be so significant. This is the training that I so wanted trainers to do. And it's why I started the apdt Foundation, to raise money to give as prizes to trainers that have done research on dog training. Because at the moment, what I find in the doggy world, in the training world, so many people are proselytizing it. Like I am now. Mm-hmm. I don't want to listen to that. I want to see you doing it. So what I've been doing the last 2 years is filming me training, and I'm now changing careers into an editor. Now what you will see is 1 minute before, boo! 1 minute after, a dog playing with that same dog in a dog park with hundreds of dogs around. But you can also see real-time training of how long it took me. And with that dog, it was about 2 hours and 3 sessions. That is a dramatic change. So, I want people to see the data before and after. And if you're interested in that, you want to know how I did it, here is the real-time training with no edit. And so, instead, what we're getting, say, the foundation, is giving grants to people to do studies in universities where half of the money goes to the university. And they're doing the wrong studies. They're all on cognition. I don't want that. I want studies on training so that we know when we see this video, we see these data, we see this video saying, I really want to see how this guy did it.
Yeah.
We know who to listen to. So like that's gone. You see, in your world, you have that. It's called competing.
Correct.
And when I got into this field, every single person at my seminars was competing in obedience. A few of them in tracking, very few in Schutzen and so on. But they all competed and they know what an NQ is. They know what a 0 is. And because of that, we maintain standards before going out in public in the trial or in the pet dog sense before walking on the street. But now people, they won't test the dogs. I've tried to get people to do it in class and they say, oh no, what if my students fail? And I tell my trainers, then I'll fire you. If your students fail, I mean, that's obviously a reflection on the teacher.
The teacher.
I was joking, of course, but I think it's the best way to learn when we test everybody's students. And now we know two things, how good you are at training dogs and how good you are at teaching people. Because I find a lot of dog trainers don't have stellar people skills. In fact, the opposite. They're very disparaging of their clients. You shouldn't have got a dog. You never should do that. That's inhumane. And no, my question is, can you train the dog? Prove it. And when I've seen that a person can cause behavior change in a dog, then I will listen to them and watch them. And then we can have a meaningful conversation about the techniques you used. And I'm not the sort of person to say, I don't like that technique, you're a horrible person. I would say, another way of doing it is this. Shall we try that and see which is quicker and easier and more effective? Then we evaluate what's enjoyable or not. But I find many trainers make value judgments on others without, and if you think about it now at workshops or conferences, when did you last see someone train a dog on stage? See, this was the way the apdt used to be up until 1999 in San Diego, when we had 1,500 people at the conference and the presenters were all training dogs on stage, dogs from the audience. And I love that. I mean, one of my favorite people to watch, I don't know whether you've ever seen her on stage, Sue Sternberg. She was hilarious. I think it was San Diego where she's teaching dogs to retrieve. So it says, well, I don't have a demo dog because I've come from the East Coast, so I'll pick 3 dogs from the audience. And she picked something like a beagle, a husky, and an Irish wolfhound to train real time on stage. It was so hilarious because she has a bag with treats in it on the floor. Well, the beagle's in the bag. So she puts the bag on the table. So this Irish wolfhound runs off with it. The whole thing was just funny.
Yeah.
But in the end, she had 3 dogs that would retrieve on cue. That's a trainer.
You kind of started something that I want to come back to this, to where the whole problem of, which is it's a very big problem, the divide between the dog training camps and which way is better and which one is not a good way to do. And I wish that we can find way that we can train, compete, and see what works the best for the dog, which dog is happy, which dog is comfortable, which dog, like it's not that hard for us to work together, but somehow there is a big divide in the community of dog training, and we all have, I have my own theories of why this is. Again, I've been training dogs for quite some time, and I come from Eastern Europe. We used to train dogs. I'm sure you train dogs the same old school way at one point, where, you use the leash and jerk and release and so on, and it was how it was done. Then the 80s came, and then people got excited that, wow, we can actually don't need to always do this kind of training. We actually can make the dog enjoy the training and make the trainer enjoy the training. Eventually, some of the books came. Karen Pryor's book came, and it started to change on a big scale what we can do. And I think a lot of trainers, including myself, I went all the way with it. And I was training pretty much without any use of aversive at one point. But in the competitions that I compete in, it was a limitation. And not just myself, but I would see that limitation of, okay, we know that we can train a dog, but if we have some element of negative reinforcement, the training can become a level or two higher. And the negative reinforcement, especially for the sports that I do, comes very important because we have to deal with competitive reinforcers on the field. And it's not possible to always control the environment. It's not possible to always use negative punishment. It's not possible. Okay, I wouldn't say it's not possible. It is possible, but it is very time-consuming, and it's not as effective in some instances. And I always anything that comes out, anything that's new, anything that's old from early 80s to today, anything that's of importance in dog training, I have studied it to a level that I understand what is going on. And anything that I see that works, I would of course take and use. No question about it. And I believe that many trainers will do the same. And this is where what you were saying, like we will have somebody will give a seminar or some studies gonna come out, and we're gonna say, well, this is, this works better than this. But then if you don't present it and you don't show us how to do it, or if you show me how to do it and I am doing it, but I am not successful, then I should be able to come back to you and learn a better way. And this is my question. When we always say that there is a better way, but we are not out there promoting that better way and not proving that it is a better way. And I think this will always change the dog training world. I think it's this side of just clashing and not working together and always saying, well, our way is better. No, our way is better. But what is your way? What exactly? Just show me what you can do, because if your way is better, I have no ego. I'm taking it all and I'm using it all. If it's better, there's no question in my head that I wouldn't do it, right? And so I have I don't understand why this is when we are saying there is a better way and there is, but it's actually not explained, and then we don't have the tools or the understanding how to deal with it. And it is different to have a dog that's doing competitive obedience than a dog that is doing a protection sport. And it's bred for that, and it has an element of aggression and in a whole different chemicals at work at that moment. And it has to listen at that time. I think it's on my opinion, a very high level of training, only if you are able not to just squash a dog, because that's easy to do. Everybody can do that. But actually to find a way to control and guide a dog that it's in that high level of arousal. And as I said, all those chemicals are just at work in a madness. And the dog really wants to do something that you're asking him to do something else. But finding the way for the dog to do what you want while they really want to do something else without showing that avoidance and suppression and just pure compliance with eagerness without the I'm doing it just because I'm afraid that you're gonna jump on me. I'm not interested in that kind of training.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people too. That my view is like in our company, my son runs it now. We've never had an argument. Does he do everything I want? No, he's in charge of the company now. He makes decisions, and sometimes I totally disagree. And so it comes into conflict. I want this done, but it's not being done. But I'm not going to argue about it. I say, well, let's do both and see which one works better. But back to the dog training thing, the way I see it, because I look back, pretty much to the 60s about this. And I never trained the formal way. I'd never seen it until I saw Barbara Woodhouse on the telly. And I thought, I don't believe what she's doing. No, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a comedy program. Saw it in a pub. I grew up on a farm. My dogs are off leash. And when I walked into my first obedience trial, my dog was 6 months and 1 day old. I had to borrow a leash. I didn't even own a leash. I didn't think about it, that in novice you've got a heel on leash as one of the exercises, And so I had to borrow someone's leash. And so I always trained off leash and was very comfortable with it. But anyway, the way I see the whole dog world, and when I look back, I do so with an incredible amount of joy when I think, the privilege I've had to be here at this time, the wonderful people I've met and watched. But I also look back with a lot of sadness, because I think I saw the peak in dog training in terms of coming together and people learning quickly was like the end of the 90s, the beginning of the new millennium. And so when I started the apdt, first in Canada, then the US, UK never worked because they wanted to exclude everybody there. The dog people are very exclusionary. But then, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and so on. It was an open educational organization. Now, if you're educating people, who do you want to educate the most? The professors? No, they know a lot. You want to educate the people who haven't got it, and haven't had the privilege to know what you know. So we welcomed anybody, no matter how you trained a dog, come and learn these methods, and we do the demos on the stage. There was tremendous togetherness at the conferences. You talk to everybody. The evenings were just so much fun. It was ridiculous. Doesn't exist now. Just does not exist. We used to have balls and dances and pub nights, and it was skits we would put on. It was a fun place to be. Now it's not so much.
I wonder if the internet has something to do with how things changed.
It started to happen in the 2000s, and it had to do with becoming theorists. And I'm sad to say I was the first person to introduce learning theory to dog training. A friend of mine said, you should call it learning secrets, because it is a secret to most people. So we brought in a bit of science, but this was meant to aid the practice of dog training, not meant to be something you argue about in lieu of actually training the dog, which has happened. Online, I see many discussions about, well, which part of the quadrant are you in, and all this stuff, rather than how can we use our learning theory, not the one people are focused on, because that's over 50 years old. It's 50 to 100 years old. The learning theory, everyone is treating as gospel, creedal. It's like it's in a little red book. Oh, no, this is negative punishment, or this is positive reinforcement, and da-da-da-da-da. And it was meant to be refined. But the point was, we put it on show, not just at the conference, but I put on what's called the Canine Games, an event where we had 8 teams, 9 dogs and handlers on each team. And all the competitions, 9 of them, were off leash. Mm-hmm. This is it. This is the final performance. And it was so wild. Like, we used to hold it in the Sky Dome in Toronto. 30,000 people there. And we did it with the Credit Valley Dog Show because they were losing supporters. So I said, well, I'll put on the Canine Games if we can get more people to come. Well, the noise we were creating, we got music playing, blaring, 30,000 people shouting and screaming. The people in obedience came over and said, could you keep it down? Our dogs are spooking. I said, well, ours aren't. Look at this team. All the handlers are less than 10. And they've got their dogs under control, off leash. This to me was the great equalizer, because then you knew you wanted to listen and watch these people and learn from them. But that has gone. There are no competitions. And I think, in part, I feel responsible for it going the way it did. I didn't notice what was happening again, the rift coming back, the tremendous animosity and hatred. And the apdt even changed from an open educational group to being exclusionary. No, like it was in England. When I tried to start it in England, I got 500 names who wanted an apdt in England. So I gave it to a good friend of mine, I won't mention his name, and he started handling it. First thing he did was took these 500 names and deleted 430 of them and said, well, they can't join. We'll pick these 70, of which 7 said, I don't want to be along to this association where you're throwing out people before we start. And the apdt in the UK took about 20 years before it built up to the 500 number that I gave them back in 1994, And this whole exclusionary thing, no, you will never change someone from excluding them from your tribe, as one totally positive dog trainer calls it. Go and join another tribe. No, if you care about dogs at all, dog trainers are precious. And the way I explain it to people, when I'm talking to a dog owner, if you see me do it, you won't believe how I'm turned into the nicest person there is. I'm nodding, I'm smiling, I'm trying to seduce this dog owner to do it my way. I've got lots of tricks of the trade that I learned from the Bozo game to convince them to give it a whirl. But when I talk to it, why? Because I don't want to deny their dog my education. And if I belittle this owner, they aren't going to do what I suggest. So I think their dog suffers, and that's my fault. But when I'm talking to a dog trainer, I'm talking about ruining the life of 2,000 dogs, because I don't have the people savvy and kindness and empathy to talk to another person just because they're doing it differently from me. It's like people that get pissed off because you vote the wrong way or you belong to the wrong religion.
Right.
I like talking to people with different beliefs and learning from it, and I will be totally civil. And that's not because I'm English, it's because I am who I am. Let's chat about it and learn. So we stopped a lot of people learning because we wouldn't allow them to come in, but we then stalled ourselves learning because the theory behind clicker training or positive dog training hasn't changed in the last 20 years. Whereas what we're doing at SIRIUS changes every year. I mean, we use techniques now that are so fast for dog-dog reactivity. You say, I'm going to click away for 3 months. Are you kidding me? I'm going to give this dog its life back again today. Let's let him off leash and go for it, because I've convinced myself it's safe. I'm not cavalier. I wouldn't do it if I think the dog was going to chew another dog up. But just the growly wowlers and the fights and all that, the argy-barges. No, let's stop that and teach this dog how to act around other dogs so we can get him back in the dog park again off leash. That's what being a dog is, sniffing bums, running with other dogs. I mean, that's what they should be doing, not on leash, being held fearfully by the owner. So, I'm a great believer in, can we do it in one session? And I think a lot of trainers got stalled. Half were prevented from learning and joining the reward-based ship, if you like. You're no longer welcome because of tools you use. And those that stayed stopped learning and forgot that, as I tell people, we don't bicycle to the moon. You know, we used to walk, we discovered horses, then bikes, motorcycles, cars, planes. Now we have rocket ships. You know, there's a thing called advances in technology, and it's happened in dog training. But I find now, you know, fewer people are, say, listening to me. If I told them, oh, I would use a DR 10, 20, 30 on that, you want to speed up a Bassett's recall? You'll have the fastest Basset on this planet. You got to use a differential reinforcement that has 4 levels of feedback. And it changes according to the quality of the behavior with every response. We recalculate. Obviously, that can be done with an iPhone app, but I have a simple formula that allows you to do it 5 reps at a time, then you recalculate. But you will speed up any dog's recall. So it's the fastest dog on the planet. Okay. I mean, we actually did train up a Basset, and he was competing in the canine games where you had 64 dogs start. They race one against the other, 2 dogs at a time. And the winning dog that sits across the finish line goes through to the next round. And we had a Basset that got into the quarterfinals, a Basset. And in one of the preliminary rounds, it knocked out a border collie. Because the owner thought, oh, I'm drawn against the Basset. Oh, my God, what a joke. It was ready to go, boom. And they forget how strong Bassets are. They don't push from the back, like, say, Shepherds or Malinois. They pull from the front. And that Basset was over the line before the border collie owner had even realized what had happened. But then the next owner up against the Basset knew what they were up against, and he got knocked out the quarterfinals. But, you know, that's what we need to do, change behavior quickly. When you look at my criteria for training, it's got to be easy. Or else the owners can't do it. The owner's not you. They have 40 years experience. They're not champion of the world. They're an owner, but they bought a Malinois, you know? And so it's got to be easy, or else they can't do it. It's got to be quick, or else they probably won't. Dogs aren't their life. It's equivalent to a VCR to them. Turn it on, turn it off. And the sooner we as trainers get used to that, instead of holier than thouing them, that you shouldn't have got a dog, the quicker we can help people out. It's got to be effective. Sounds dumb, right? No. Not if you count leash jerks and you count electric shocks, or you count food treats week by week. And what you find is they don't change. Well, if they don't change, it's presumably because the behavior hasn't changed. Over here, the behavior hasn't decreased in frequency to 0. Over here, it hasn't improved to 100. Yet you're still shocking, jerking, or treating at the same frequency. Well, isn't that evidence to you that this ain't working? What you're calling a punishment or a reward isn't a punishment or a reward. You know, that's why quantification is so important. It's why I play games, because it is the most ruthless quantification there is. You know, as in the old obedience trials or walking dog trials or gun dog trials or tracking or what have you. So I competed the canine games for people. And when you have 64 dogs, how many first place dogs will there be? 1. The fastest dog in the tournament. There'll be a silver medal, there'll be a bronze medal. That is ruthless quantification. And that's what we need back in dog training, but not so much ruthless, my dog versus yours, but you and your dog versus you and your dog. What's your personal best? You'll only know if you count or time. And then when you best your personal best, that's the time for you and your dog to celebrate. You know you're working for a team. And I've met some dogs, when you were talking about competing, where I am convinced that these dogs actually got the thrill out of the competition. This was in obedience, though, that not only were they trained what to do, but they had the thrill of doing a good job. Yeah. It was obvious to me that the owner, who at the time was the best trainer in the US, and then became one of my puppy trainers, Susie Bluford. Well, not to say the best trainer in the US, but she had the highest ranking Arch dog, let's put it that way, with the most number of points. And that dog, you could see him, he loved heeling properly. He took pride in it. He was showing behaviors that she wasn't asking him for. It's like if dogs have pride, I don't know, but he seemed proud of his owner and proud of his performance. And I say it's the holy grail of positive or reward-based dog training is you don't use any external reinforcers at all. The response becomes the reward for the dog. Doing it is sufficient.
Yeah.
And you see this a lot once you get to bite work, say in Schutzhund, they will go at that with more verve than they will with the obedience or say the tracking. And back when I used to counsel some Schutzhund trainers back when, and so I looked at point spreads in the three disciplines. Bite work, you got a tiny point spread between the top 10 dogs. In bite works like that and tracking like that, and obedience, it was colossal. So if you just make sure you first compete in novice kennel club obedience, you will kill Schutzhund obedience. This was back then, not so much now. Who is going to make up that point spread, even if they come first in bite work and first in tracking? Mathematically, they can't. You know, it's very different now. Obedience is a big thing in Schutzhund now. But back then, 40 years ago, it wasn't. Correct. The obedience was totally sloppy. And so it makes it a winnable sport with not the best dog. It's kind of like our elections in the States. Yeah, we've got to get back to people doing it. And this is where years ago in the 90s, I went to the AKC and said, the novice exam in the AKC is the best exam for a companion dog. It's wonderful. Quick sits, one command, rock solid stays, walks by your side on a loose lead. I mean, hello, why don't you just change it and offer the same exam, but people can talk to the dog the whole way through? Mm-hmm. And this one command only thing ruined what could have been, I think, the most fun, attractive sport out there, because it's a very well designed test, which has been copied in many other dog sports. And even if you like, between exercises, offer a treat or throw a tennis ball or play tug. Sure. For owners. And instead, no, this whole thing, you only give one command, you can't praise. I mean, it's how to make a misery out of something that's enjoyable. It's like, oh, we have a difficult exercise here, dog training. I want you to make it really unenjoyable. That was AKC obedience. Why didn't they change the word, and have a pre-novice where you could talk to the dog? I mean, they do have a pre-novice of sorts, but you can talk to the dog all the time, because that's what a pet owner wants. Yeah. And you can give treats. You have 10 treats, say, per trial. Yeah. And the whole dog world would be different then, because people have to do it. And as I tell everybody, dog behavior doesn't lie. I can look at your dog and your dog barked 5 times, that's a fact. Why he did it, we can argue forever. Well, he's abused when young, or he's lonely, or he has anxiety. No, he barked 5 times. Solve that problem. Teach him to shush after 1 bark. Behavior is observable and quantifiable, testable, so we can test what people are saying. There's too many people blabbing at the moment and not enough people posting videos of what they're doing.
So what do you think? Where would, if we try to at least, I'm certain that we cannot get everybody together. There was always going to be extreme on each side, that they will not want to ever agree or listen to anything different than what their ideology tells them to. But I also know that the majority of dog training and people that love dogs, they don't necessarily want to be in these extreme places, and they want to do the best they can for their dogs. And in my opinion, the best for a dog is whatever the best for that dog is, and it shouldn't be based on ideology or if we try something and it may work with 50 dogs, but it doesn't work with that dog, do we not want to try something else that maybe has a chance to? And how do we get everybody? Because if we all start to train dogs together and actually share ideas instead of just saying, no, my way is better than your way and your way is better, but we actually start sharing ideas and we have some competitions to where it's really, as you said, it's like, no, we can prove this. It's easy. You watch it. You know, it's not, I don't listen to it. I want to see it. There's got to be a way that we can get back to making dog training exciting, because there is a lot that we can learn from everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Canine Games was one of the best ideas I ever had, but I had a stupid business model, and every year I did it in a different city. So I started in San Francisco, moved to LA, then to Washington, DC, then to Chicago, then to Toronto. Now, when I was in Toronto, we stayed there for 4 years. But I was only doing one event each, so I never developed an audience, you know. The only place where it happens regularly is Japan, where it's an annual event. They have a league there and then an annual playoff, because it is the most hilarious 3 days I've ever seen in my life. You know, we have 9 games which all improve the dog's value as a companion and improve its quality of life. So like in the wolf relay, you have 5 dogs. Each dog has to bark 3 times and shush. If he barks a 4th time, the whole team's disqualified. 5 dogs have to do it. Woof, 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 woof. The world record is 7.2 seconds. Pretty good, eh?
That is.
Yeah. And so, and my favorite event, it was Dances with Dogs. And in the event description, it says you have 2 minutes to complete your performance. No, you have 30 seconds to set up. You have 2 minutes to complete your performance. That's all it says. And the things we've had there, we've had like drill groups, you know, 7 owners, 7 dogs. We had a guy came on dressed as an accountant, carrying a briefcase with his dog, a collie, wearing 7 veils. And the music starts, da 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 da, and he strips and dances with his dog. You know, we've had plays, we've had humor. It's amazing what people come up with when you just say, you've got 2 minutes, do it. But I have a list right here, actually, of things I tried and succeeded in, and a list of things I tried and failed. And so things I've tried and failed, Canine Games, my fault. I should have had it in San Francisco and kept it there every year.
Yeah.
Building up to where it's grossing a couple of million every year, and then it spreads. I should have done that. Maybe in the future. All sorts of things. The 0-calorie treat. This was a puffer that puffed the odor of liver to a dog. You had 30,000 puffs in one treat, ideal for vets or groomers handling dogs who want to treat a lot without feeding it, you know? So I tried all these things and they
Interesting. So what happened there?
People didn't get it. I tried to sell it and people said, oh, you're teasing the dog. And now I would say, no, I'm not. Smelling the treat's far more rewarding to the dog than actually eating it. They'll sniff it forever and then look, it's gone. It's heading to the dog's anus already, you know. And so, you know, trying things, and like more recently, you know, people are moaning about this trainer on TV and that. So I started a program on an old website called Dog Star Daily. It's still there. You can look at this stuff.
Yes.
And it was called America's Dog Trainer and then World's Dog Trainer. So I wrote to hundreds of trainers and said, look, I know you don't like what you see on TV. Here's your chance. You have 30 minutes, okay, to show what you do. I couldn't get anyone to do it. what I have there, I thought I'd do series after series, trainers around the world and trainers in the States. I think I only got like 10 of each. And then I thought, well, I'll put on puppy pantomimes, another failure. So a pantomime is a very, very English thing at Christmas. It's a play like Cinderella or Puss in Boots, and all the women are played by men, and all the women are played by men, and a lot of the men are played by women. And you're in fancy costumes. It has a lot of famous people doing it, like soccer stars and, motor racers and what politicians. And you all take part in a panto at Christmas. So I had this contest, and it had a massive money prize, $1,000 or something. The best video, and the theme was something like summer fun. And you'll see it's still on Dogstar Daily. We've only posted the top 10, but it was so much fun. These people, just some of them, the top 5, just went overboard. Some of the others were pretty dorky, but they made you laugh and they were fun. And it was people having fun with their dogs and doing stuff that was really cool, And a couple of the dogs were incredibly well trained. But, we picked it for not just technical merit, but artistic impression. Like with and I think we got to bring those things back. And because when I try stuff like that, I'm always too long, like 20 minutes. No one wants to watch a show for 20 minutes. They want to watch a dog trainer for 1 minute. Then if we had 100 different dog trainers doing the same thing, teaching a dog to sit stay, but you've only got 1 minute. Okay, off you go. And it can be real time or fast forward. My son does that a lot when I'm training stays. Like I think in one of our SIRIUS videos, he fast forwards this dog. He's not responding to an all or none reward training thing to find my face and look at me. And he's just sitting looking at my bum. And he does this for like 3 minutes. So Jamie just fast forwards 2.5 minutes. And then all the dogs say, oh, that's not your face. And he comes around and sits front looking at the face. And this stuff was fun. And I think, dog training just got such a bad rap in the media, and especially on TV. And when I look at dog training programs on TV, it's like watching grass grow. They're formulaic, they're boring. That's not what dog training is. Dog training should be razzmatazz and fast. And but showing how to do it and showing how the trainer, back to what you said about training dogs, we need a plan A. It needs to be quantified and tested. What is the quickest, easiest, most effective way to teach, say, a 1 minute sit stay? Yeah. But for the occasional dog where that doesn't work, what's your plan B and your plan C? And we must teach owners when things became totally 100% absolutely positive. The trainer wasn't teaching the owner what to do if the dog misbehaved or was non-compliant. It's all very well saying, well, turn your back on the dog that jumps up, but no, the owner wants a solution now. How about just telling the dog sit? End of problem. No. So we have to deal with non-compliance and misbehavior. And I find a lot of trainers are not doing that. And I would say a lot of arguments in dog training are straw men. They aren't actually arguments about dog training at all, because often both extremes haven't trained their dog. And think how many conferences you've been to. Let's take, say, a shock collar conference or a clicker conference where the dogs are wearing shock collars or being clicked at. You shouldn't be seeing that in an educational conference. So they obviously aren't training tools, they're management tools. But they obviously aren't there because that shock is not a punishment and that click is not a secondary reinforcer. It's being totally misused. And these are the people arguing. Right. It's not about training. We can have a discussion about training because you take certain pride in certain people. Like I remember one of my books, the Dr. Dunbar's Good Little Dog book, that was named after a good friend of mine who sadly died, I think last year, Martin Dealey. And when I first saw him train, it was part of my TV program. I'm at a county fair in England. He's working in a 40-acre field. He takes 3 dogs from the audience and teaches them to retrieve off-leash, all of them, just using his voice and the tennis ball. And my producer says to me, "You're crying, Ian, what's wrong?" And I just said, "This is just so beautiful to watch. This guy's training 3 dogs off leash just with praise and a tennis ball. It's magical, you know, and we can take joy in other people doing it and doing it well. And we can take joy in a final performance, but we must see and evaluate and quantify the final performance before we can argue about methods."
Right.
Because what is the bigger abuse? And Kelly, I think you got the wrong Dunbar for this interview. It should have been Kelly. She's the Malinois person, but there you go. She's always said, what is greater, more abusive in a dog? To solve the problem quickly using something that could be a little scary or physically painful, or not to solve the problem and live with it, giving the dog grief every day, even if you're just in a huff, denying the dog your joy and companionship because you haven't trained the dog. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I don't like these straw man arguments about training when the dogs haven't been trained. I want to see proof of training. And the good old day was cool, man. I learned, you know, I was a doggy expert before I competed. And I never actually competed. I partook of obedience. I was not a competitor. I was in there with a Malamute, right? The 3rd time in the ring, I learned what it was about. I went in the ring 6 months, 1 day, 6 months, 2 days, just flew by. Thought this is easy. Then we failed the downstay. And I thought, this is an interesting problem. What do I do if my dog breaks a stay when he's 35 feet away, but I'm not allowed to talk to him or signal him? And it challenged my brain, and I worked it out. And so I continued then lecturing to, you know, competitive people, you know, because I learned things like get the problem out of the pattern. So let's say you have a problem with the dog holding a retrieval object or a sleeve in his jaws, and he's got problems like he's munching on it, keeps re-gripping. I would say, don't solve this problem in the pattern you're doing, you know, in competitive obedience. Get it out. You've got to do it with toys. And you do it in your living room, you're sitting down, and it's off. Take it, hold it. Good dog, thank you. Whew. He held it for 1 second. Now build it up to 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. Then do it with every object in the living room, your car keys, your wallet, a cushion, a toy, squeaky toys. That's a hard one to hold and not squeak. Then you've got it. Take the object perfectly and hold it. But don't do that retraining in the pattern, because if the dog makes a mistake, you get frustrated. That frustration poisons the pattern. And then you have a dog whose head goes down and you say, let's compete. And he's like, no, because she'll only get mad at me. You know, because, you know, some people in obedience and a lot of the working sports, you're dealing with the most sensitive breeds out there. Yeah. It's like, I've seen dogs where the owner just goes, and that dog goes flat. Well, number one, let's socialize and get him used to your moods, because you're obviously a moody, testy person. So we want a dog that doesn't give a damn, that when you go, you son of a bitch, the dog just says, don't confuse me for someone that gives a damn. Now on with the exercise, you know.
Very, very interesting. Yes, that's like you did talk to, you were at the last conference with the IACP, I think, right? What did you think of that?
It was like going back in time. I've never had so much fun in my life. There were, you know, I couldn't do too much drinking these days now, but the partying and the dancing till 2 a.m, and I talked to everyone.
Nice.
because I was kind of a black sheep coming in, but sadly I did it because of Martin Dealey, because when I got there, he already died. So I was down there 5 days, expecting to spend them with my old buddy, and I was pretty much on my own because I went on my own. But yeah, it's anyone who's training a dog, I like to look at what they do. See, I'm not the dog trainer in the family, that's like, Kelly, my former wife, or my girlfriend now, they train dogs. They put in the time. They work with it. What I'm good at is watching, observing, quantifying, and then saying, here's your problem. Just change this. You'll find it's different within the realms of the techniques they use. So, God, on Facebook, people went apeshit when I mentioned this. I just mentioned something like Petco had taken shock collars off the shelves. Oh my God, the abuse I got, because I said, personally, I've never used a shock collar. I never will, because I don't like electricity. And I don't know whether the dog feels it the same as I do, but I know what happens when I feel it, and I wet my pants, And I said, however, I've given many lectures on how best to use them. And they just went crazy. And so I had to explain afterwards. I said, because most shocks aren't punishments by definition. If we shocked a dog for, say, jumping up, well, we'd expect him to jump up less. Therefore, we shock him less. Eventually, not to jump up at all. Therefore, we don't shock him at all. But it's not what we're seeing. We're seeing lots of shocks. Therefore, it is not an aversive punishment. Maybe a little aversive, but it's not punishment in the sense of causing the behavior to decrease in frequency. And so that's where, and I would do the same with someone with a clicker. I would say, oh my God, you're clicking like a maniac. Refine your criteria. You should only be clicking 1 out of 3 approximations to the behavior. Otherwise, you won't improve in quality quickly enough, And same, I feel the same about punishments. If you use them, you shouldn't be using them again. Otherwise, you haven't trained the dog.
Right.
And why it was that. So let's go back and rethink that problem. And there's many little things that you can change, to make that better. Like, in the heavy-duty competition world, I'd say, let's get really unbelievable impulse control on a dog over stupid games first. Because it doesn't matter if you screw up here. But when you say sit, stay, I want that dog to be not just solid as a rock, but relaxed as a rock. Because he knows there's no way you will release him until certain things happen. Well, I call these combination unlocking cues. Like, for example, in competitive obedience, when you're doing the stays and they say back to your dog, and they say release your dog, most people, before they release their dog, they heel 1 step forward. So the judge says, exercise finished, release your dog. Well, instead of saying free dog, they go heel, 1 step, sit, free dog. I did something slightly different, which no one ever saw. I would go back to my dog and take 1 step backwards in heel. And so in any stay, my dog knew, unless he does a 1 step heel backwards, he's never going to say, hang loose. And this was my hand signal, which my hand would never do by accident, And so that to me is the joy of training, watching someone and making what they do better. Because I'm good at seeing glitches. I don't have the patience to put in. All my training now is done in 25 minutes, and I'm filming it because I want you to see what the dog was like here and what he's like now, 25 minutes later. Sometimes 1 session only, sometimes 3.
I think that's a great idea. I think for the most part, a lot of trainers are just stuck in this endless repetitions and drills that completely disregard dog's intelligence and don't think that the dog can actually grasp some concept in a very brief interaction. And dogs are so capable of this, and actually makes it, the whole interaction and training and learning makes it so much more interesting for a dog when you stimulate that little brain in the way that something needs to happen. Like right now, we don't need 5 weeks to learn something that can be taught and practiced within minutes. And it's very nice to hear that. It's a very, very good approach, and I think in almost every dog sport, every kind of dog training, there is this idea that we have to keep repeating and build this muscle memory, and just like they're just not smart enough to understand what we want, so we need to just keep going forever and ever and ever. And the dogs get bored and they lose motivation, and they're like, okay, this is just the most boring time.
Training really has, slowed down. It used to be the old way. Remember, wait till they're a year old, put them on leash, and keep going to class for 3 years. Then hopefully you'll get one leg in novice or something like that. But we speeded it up with luring. Then it started to slow down as it lost its voice. It lost instruction. Then it lost praise. It was praised by clickers. And it really slowed down to a standstill of getting stuff done. And so, I love it when, we really now accelerate the training process. And so I now do it by trial. And so I tell people, by the 8th trial, so when I'm working with any dog, here's what I do. I say, hello, dog, here's a treat. I step back, say, dog, come, treat. Then step back, dog, come, sit, treat. And I step back, dog, come, sit, down, sit, stand, down, stand. The 4th trial, so I've done 4 trials. The dog's got 4 food rewards, given me 10 behaviors. Come, sit, down, sit. Sorry, come, sit, down, stand, sit, down. How did I make it 10 behaviors then?
Well, they have the original come.
Yeah, come, sit, down, sit, stand, down, stand. Yeah, so 10 behaviors for 4 treats in 4 trials. Now I do 4 more trials, same as trial 4. I step back, come, sit down, sit, stand, down, stand, come, sit down, sit, stand, down, stand. 4 trials now. So after 8 trials, the last 4 trials gave me 28 behaviors, okay, for 4 treats. So I'm looking at the response-treat ratio, okay, how many responses I get for a single treat. And then I put the food in my pocket, step back and say, come here, sit, with my empty hand. And they come and sit, and I phased out the lure by trial 9. This is the first session. Trial 9, that food is out of my hand. Think now, all the people that use food as a lure, how long does it take them to phase it out of their hand? Never. They're bribing the dog.
They don't think about it.
It's
right,
crazy.
They don't think about it.
And that's why speed is such an important thing to measure. Because, I really get owners. I always used to say that, I tried to devise training techniques that were dog friendly. But now I try to design techniques which are people friendly and dog friendly. Because I get it with people. They want it done yesterday. They don't want you to tell them they shouldn't have got a dog, or this will take forever, or you got to be patient and consistent. They don't want to know that. They want a training technique where they can get it done in a few minutes and be inconsistent. And that's what we have to deliver. And that's what we have to creatively. So how the hell can we do that then without compromising the dog's behavior at other times? And that's very simple. We have, multiple names for the dog. For one, I give suggestions like, hey, Hughie, baby, come here. It means a suggestion, like a stop sign in Florida, And
yes.
you'd have to do it. But most of the time the dogs do. But if I said, Hugo Louis, sit, or in his case, it would be Hugo Louis, assis. It would also be in French. He knows that is not a suggestion, it's a must do. And we can whisper that command, Hugo Louis, assis, because he knows I will follow up because I called him Hugo Louis. It's a must do. And the interesting thing, when you follow up, you don't even have to raise your voice. If you just follow up until the dog does it, and then when he does it, so let's say I had to ask him 5 times before he eventually sat. But when he does it eventually, I say, thank you. Now he has to repeat the whole exercise. Come here, sit. And he has to keep doing that until he does it on a single command. Because people are hung up about that. Never give to repeat the command. I don't give a shit if I repeat it 10 times. If I have to repeat the command, you repeat the exercise till you do it following a single command. And the dogs learn. When he calls me Hugo Louis, I have to do it on one command, no matter how many times I repeat it. So I might as well do it on the first command. You know, it's so simple when you think about it. And how did I learn this? That's how my grandpa and my dad trained me. Trained me. They would ask me once. They never shouted, never hit me, ever. I did it, man. They said, Ian, shush. I was quiet. We had certain respect back then, but without raising the voice. And I think that's wonderful, you know, with dogs and with family. Because we can now communicate when it's a deal breaker. If I use a different name, like, you know, kids do it all the time. You know, Johnny, don't touch. Johnny, put that down. You know, Juan Carlos Hernandez, siéntate. So not only do they change from informal name to formal name, but they change languages, and Johnny does it immediately. Now, sadly, he's doing it immediately because he's likely been smacked around the back of the head. You don't have to. You just have to follow up. And they just learn.
Food seems to be a big part of the reinforcer or reward that you use. Do you move into?
Because it's a good starter. Yeah, you see, owners can't use affect. They can't use tone. I love being silly, and I'll like talk to the dog, saying, Rafa, are you doing a good dog? Now sit. And the dog will do it. Or I use air treats. That's my favorite. And I go, off, and the dog's off. And then I say, take it. And the dogs go, and just eat, just pretend, you know. But people can't do that. So a food lure gets it done quickly, teaches the meaning of words in the quickest way possible via hand signals. And a food reward is that short-term starter reward because you couldn't praise a dead cabbage. You know, they can't praise, they can't say thank you. The knee-jerk human foible is to ignore the good and punish the bad, bitch at the bad. All the dog does that's wonderful, we totally ignore it, then he barks once, we get over his case. Same with kids, same with spouses, same with pupils, same with employees, you know. And so the food goes straight to the dog's brain and motivates him from an owner who is like, sit. Or they're doing, here's their hand signal. This will be funny because I'm on camera. Instead of going, Robert, sit, upwards in front of their nose, they go, sit. Well, you can't sit. They're pointing at the dog's butt over his head. Well, he doesn't have an eye in the back of his head. And, you know, he doesn't have the cognitive wherewithal that pointing down means you want his butt down. Instead, you get the nose to follow up, just like a horse. Lead it by the nose, the rest of the body will follow. So it's only to start them off, but we phase it out in the very first session. Food as a lure, it's on the table. I won't let them have it in their hand. I won't let them have it on their person. I say, food bag's on the table, middle of the room, there's your distraction. You have to call the dog away from it or get the dog to sit and look at you. When that happens, you say, good dog, go and get a bit out of your food bag and give to the dog. So we use the food initially as a lure, then as a distraction and as a reward, but we're always playing games to see how many responses we can get for a single food reward. Like how many puppy push-ups till he fails.
So what would you do to increase motivation if certain dogs would have really crazy food drive and some dogs would not be so And especially when you have a person that can get excited and can get motivated enough, where do you go?
We use rewards like most people have never even thought of. So just very quickly, because we're approaching 2 hours.
Yeah, I know.
So very quickly, I use the food because the novice owners need it, but we quantify phasing it out. We go cold turkey on the lure, and the food then becomes a reward only, but it's at a distance as a distraction. So that can be done a number of ways. Either a friend of yours is holding it. So if you say good dog, because the dog's sitting and looking at you, whenever you say good dog, they will give the dog a food reward. But we're always building how many responses, how many heel sit sequences for a single treat, how many come sit sequences in a row, say 25 one-step sequences, come sit, across the room for one treat at the end. So we're always increasing the response reward ratio. But then the easiest way to phase out a food, and if the dog doesn't like food, you train the dog to like food. It's no different than a dog that doesn't like children. You train it to like children, by following food by something the dog likes. Like what? Off, take it with a bit of kibble, chest scratch. Off, take the bit of kibble on the couch. Off, take the bit of kibble, throw a tennis ball. So now that bit of kibble, you think about it. It's not like a clicker, which is only a secondary reinforcer for a treat. The kibble, in my book, is a secondary reinforcer for everything remotely enjoyable for this dog, because he has to come and sit and take a bit of miserable kibble. I don't use treats at all. I don't. It's junk food, You eat the kibble, and that could mean what's coming next could be fetch, tug, jazz up, settle down, tag. That means I allow you to run away and I chase you on the couch, chest rub, sniffing another dog's butt, is all followed by taking the kibble. Sitting, looking at me, taking the kibble. Then we play the interactive games, fetch and tug. Tug's my favorite because the tug's next to you and it means nothing to other dogs in the dog park. So you throw one tennis ball and you could have a whole bunch. But tug only means something to my dog. And again, the tug is a mega secondary. Sit, take the tug, hold it, don't pull yet, and then thank you and a chest rub instead. Occasionally it's sit, hold the tug and pull on it, okay, when you give the cue. So the tug is a secondary that sort of means a lot to the dog. So the interactive rewards, then I look at what's really reinforcing to the dog. Most people classify these things and activities as behavior problems. Sniffing a dog's butt, pulling on leash for my Malamute, that solved forging on heeling in one session. When I put pulling on leash on cue, and if he heeled, I would say pull, okay? And I was a sledder, I was a member of the NorCal Malamute, club and cross-country skiing. I've got a Malamute to pull me uphill now. It was brilliant. So it could be the dog likes running away. If we ever watch dogs play, what do? They run up to a dog and jump on it, then they turn around and run off and want to be chased. So we play tag. Off, take it. You take the tag toy. When I tap you on the head, you run, I chase. Periodically, I say, Rover, come. To continue the game, you have to come and sit. Or I just say finish and walk off. They learn that very quickly. So you get quick recalls. But the reward is you can run away and I will chase you. Jazz up, settle down. Put craziness on cue. All dogs need it if they're locked up in an apartment. So we go jazz up, settle, jazz up, settle, jazz up, settle. And before you know it, you got the quickest settle in the world. So, and once you get to the working world, it's inevitably their sport. You actually start off, as I say, a winner there because you know what the dog's going to love doing. You like biting the sleeve or the full body suit, depending on which sport you're playing, or running and doing hurdles, going over the palisade, that you already know when you teach the dog how to play these games, the games will be absolutely self-reinforcing. And we know that from how hard it is for novice trainers to hold the dog back from any bite work. The dogs are barely in control. Okay, so the control and the impulse control I would have taught from other games that don't involve the dog's jaws. So this dog is, when you say chill, man, he's chill. I love to see a violent, competitive dog. By violent, I don't mean aggressive. I mean a dog that's really into competition. But one word from the owner: chill. I once had a guy come to me. I got a seminar in Seattle, and he was there early, and I was talking to him. He was having a sandwich, his breakfast. And I said, "Oh, are you in the workshop?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Where's your dog?" He says, "Up there." His Malinois had climbed a tree and was lying over a branch like a lion. I said to Doug, it's funny. So he says, "Oh, you want to see him?" Called him down, gave me a little demo. Then he says, "Chill." And the dog just dropped like a rag dog. I mean, it was impressive. It's wonderful. But how do we train him to drop like a rag doll? By giving him what he wants to do. You must use the problem as the reward in training, or you won't get anywhere. And in the companion world, it's pulling on leash and sniffing another dog's butt. You've got to use that as your reward for sitting and looking at you.
So like when you, like just, I know we need to wrap up, but when I just remember to ask, like when we talk pulling on leash and talking pet dogs, what is your take on the no pull harnesses that are becoming popular right now?
Well, if people know how to use them as a training tool to solve the problem in a couple of weeks and then they're no longer necessary, cool. But it's not how they're used. So I'll talk about two different tools now, say a shock collar and a gentle leader. Mm-hmm. What do owners do with them that is too stupid for words? They get it out the package from Amazon, put it on the dog and use it right away. And in one trial, they've ruined it as the training tool because the dog has learned you can't run off with this collar on, or you can't pull with this, halter on. What you should do is put them on. Let the dog wear it for 2 weeks and still misbehave. Then what you do is you add in another cue. And it can either be a verbal cue, a formal name for the dog now. I like a scent cue on the dog's collar. So what I do is I rub the dog's leather flat collar with mink oil with 1 drop of perfume in it. Any perfume will do. Mm-hmm. It's unique to the dog. So you let the dog sniff the collar and put it on. Say, wow, collar smells totally different today, whatever. And then instead of now the dog going off on his flat collar, but wearing a halter or a shock collar that's not functioning for a week, so he gets used to it. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't do much. The day you put on the scented flat collar, you connect up or you hold the controller for the shock collar. It's the same principle, no matter what the tool is. And a couple of, whoa, you can't run off with this on, this smelly collar. See, because now the dog the only difference, the dog's thinking, what's different? I could always run off. I could always pull on leash. What's different is this smell. So now you do that for a month, okay? And now you'll find now the dog's not running off or pulling. So now we let the dog wear the shock collar and let the dog wear the gentle leader, but it's not connected anymore. He's on the flat or he's off leash. And you find now you've got the control.
Yeah.
And so now we take off the various tools and give it to someone else. But people don't know how to use them. As I said, I've never used a shock collar. I never would. I don't like the idea of shocking dogs. And I think that if we're saying, well, it's the only way to control this dog, I say, well, why don't you get an easier dog? Maybe the dog is too much for you. Or sit down and let's have a think tank. How can we control this dog in this situation where he's glassy-eyed and gone gaga over what he wants to do and we can't get through to him? And I would say, yeah, we can do that with most dogs. It, of course, is easier if you know that you're breeding this dog to compete in obedience or rally or working sports. And so you do this stuff early on and get your reliable off-leash dog. So the way we train in SIRIUS, the dogs are off-leash from beginning to end of class. And it's silly pet dog training, but they're reliable off-leash. And so now if the owner puts a leash on the dog, he walks on a loose leash because you train him off-leash to follow and heel. You've trained him off-leash to do sit-stays. I mean, that is the big game changer to me. When you've trained your puppy off-leash, when you now go into, you want a really good companion at home, where you go into some really good dog sports, you have such an advantage knowing your dog's reliable off-leash. You may lose some points, but you'll never lose your dog. And I learned that when, in the third trial, when Omaha ran off. He didn't run off. He left me when off-leash. Oh, no, that was the third trial. It was the fifth trial. He leaves me when heeling. See, I had suddenly, as a dog expert, learned what competition is, got problems to solve. So this one, I'm heeling away with him, and he just goes, woo, 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 bunny hops twice and walks, jumps over the ring, through the next ring, into the fifth ring, where he joins a golden retriever heeling with his owner. I'm not kidding. And so I continue my heeling pattern. I don't know what to do. I'm a novice to obedience, right? And I actually had to hop over the ring myself. And I say to the judge, do I keep walking? He says, no, like this. Well, now everyone at the show, including 200 people from the Malamute specialty watching me compete, are all looking at this Malamute off-leash in another ring, go, oh, it's a Malamute, and no stewards will go up to take hold of it. So I said to the judge, well, what do I do? Do I call him back? The judge said, you could. I said, oh, yeah, no problem. Omaha, sit. And he sat 5 rings away, and the whole show went quiet. So I'm sort of looking around thinking, well, I failed the off-leash heeling, but I've got the distance sit down. So I've got his attention now. So I said, Omaha, come. And he comes, jumping over the 4 ring ropes to move through the 3 rings, 5 rings rather. And he sits in front, sloppy, but he sat. So I had him finish, and he sat. And the judge is looking at me. I remember his name. His name was Al. Oh no, I've just forgotten. It was Al someone. Anyway, he put his arm around me and said, Dr. Dunbar. This was embarrassing. I'd lectured at every friggin' club, right? And he said, Dr. Dunbar, he said, you have really amazing off-leash control over your dog, apart from when you're heeling. I said, yeah, I have a heeling problem lately. I think he's getting bored with the heeling. It's just too repetitive, but I'm thinking about it. He says, but he sat 5 rings away. Why didn't you tell him to sit before he left the ring? I said, oh, you can't give a second command, because it had been drummed into me, In the obedience class I was taking, you never give a second command. I honestly thought it was a cardinal sin, and that the AKC could say, castrate me if I gave a second command or something. But it's kind of stupid if you think about it. Your dog's running towards a cliff, chasing a seagull, and say, Rover, sit. Oh, damn. I mean, so of course you give a second command. And it doesn't, and I've tested this out over and over, it does not delay the dog learning if you train it properly. Because when I started with Zuzu, her first time sitting at a distance, I gave her 22 commands in a row before she sat. Now, because her problem was, if I said anything, she'd run back to me at high speed and sit in front. No, I wanted to sit at a distance. So Kelly had her on leash, and I'm way off, like 35 yards. And after 22 commands, she sat. That's how I started. But by the end of that walk round Point Isabel, 1 command, she sat at a distance. So when you actually quantify, you realize, no, you can't unlearn something you haven't learned yet. If a dog doesn't know what sit means, you can't have an unlearning of that. It won't take longer to learn what sit means. Doesn't matter. And I demonstrate this in workshops. I go up to a dog and say, down, 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 down. Now I'm going to teach the dog what down means. Rover, down, lure, treat. Do it again. Come, down, lure, treat. Come, down, hand signal, treat. Come down, hand signal. Come down, hand signal. Come down, no hand signal. Now the dog does it. You know, and it's just as quick.
So you're I think we're on the same page here with when you start teaching something, you pretty much you start with giving the cue, giving the command. You're not waiting for a I do the same.
Yeah, because we're luring, and if we know we're going to lure, so we can cause the behavior any time, then let's not miss the first trial. Say, Rover, sit, lure.
Yes, it's always a little bit strange for me how people are afraid to put a name until the behavior is supposedly perfect, and then we name it.
You can rename it as much as you like. I mean, I met some obedience competitors who would go through 10 names for a command and 20 names for their dog. Because in the course of training, because back then there was a lot of leash jerking and what have you, they were poisoning a lot of names and cues. So once you've got it, build on that. And the way you do that is you would be new name, old name. So you'd say, you know, Hugo Louis assis, sit. Well, he knows what sit means, so that's kind of like a verbal lure. So always the new name comes first. So the new name doesn't have the poison of the old cue, but it has the knowledge of the old cue. And so, you know, no, I with being mainly a trainer of pet dogs, where I know time is of the essence, I can't say I'm going to wait for a few trials. No, first trial, we use all 7 commands. You know, come, sit, down, sit up, stand, down, stand up. And that's 7 different responses, and we use them on the 4th trial all at once. But because we're luring, you see, when clicker training start, there are a lot of people who said, oh, you mustn't lure when you're shaping. It's not pure shaping. That was, you know, I was under a lot of pressure, and people were saying luring was wrong. I said, no, luring makes it quick. Luring enables you to teach hand signals within just half a dozen trials, and verbal commands with most breeds within 20 reps. And a verbal command is hard to teach, or hard for a dog to learn. They will learn an eye blink, a facial expression, or a hand signal so fast. But actually a verbal command in neutral tone, very, very difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
So, well, look, we should wrap this up. My bladder's bursting. I need a beer. I'm fed up with this water. It was so much fun chatting to you.
Thank you.
I'll see you again after many years.
We're gonna put on the below the podcast all the information how people can find you. Anything specific? Would it right now? I'm guessing it's the dog, the academy, right?
I have something you can give them for a nice freebie. So Dunbar Academy, it's a subscription site. If you give them a secret code, which is GG, so when they sign up, it will ask them for their credit card payment. They enter the coupon code GG, they get their first month for free. Well, if they binge watch, they can go through 1/5 of the site in 1 month for free. And then they sign off and their credit card won't be charged. So they get a whole 1 month for free. Or if they want to stay on, it's what is it, $20 a month or something. So the coupon code is GG.
Perfect. Do you have any book that you're working on, new something, or you do?
I just wrote a dog training course and exam, and it's a very peculiar course because it's about 200 questions, very short questions with short answers. So you take the exam first, then you read my answers, and you take the exam again, and then you listen to my answers, and you take the exam until it's perfect. Perfect. It's really no different if you think for an obedience competition. We know the questions beforehand. It's a matter of training the dog to perfection. Well, I think it's a nice way to train people. So I train them by answers. That was exciting to do, and actually designed it for veterans. But I realized it's going to be useful for dog trainers because it's stuff that's not written down anywhere else. But most exciting, 2 weeks ago, I started a new book, and it's going to be very different. It's about nowhere is this stuff written down. It's hidden in a lot of my seminars, but because you'd have to watch them for days and days to get these little nuggets out. So it's a book about how there's so many things we've been doing wrong for a long time, and we're kind of stuck where we are. And training should be about always questing for a better way, quicker, easier, more effective, more enjoyable. Okay. And it applies obviously to the teaching of people too. So that I'm really excited about.
Jan, thank you so much.
The next time we'll talk about my difficulty getting into Bulgaria.
I heard something. That's a different conversation. We have to leave that one for next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care. Thank you so much.